Good morning and welcome. I am Diane Herriot, the Acting Secretary of the Department of Parliamentary Services and your MC for today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians upon the land upon which we are gathered and to pay my respects to their elders past and present, particularly Auntie Laura Bell, who is here with us today and will shortly welcome us to her country. I would like to acknowledge also the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Tony Abbott, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bronwyn Bishop, the President of the Senate, Senator the Honourable Stephen Parry, Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia, Robert French, the British High Commissioner to Australia, Mrs Mena Rawlings, the Attorney-General, Senator the Honourable George Brandis, the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Bill Shorten, other Senators and members present, distinguished members of the diplomatic community, the Clerk of the Senate, Dr Rosemary Laing, the Clerk of the House of Representatives, Mr David Elder, CEO of the Royal Australian Mint, Mr Ross McDermott, Director of the Australian Museum of Democracy, Ms Daryl Karp, Director General of the National Archives, Mr David Fricker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and a special welcome to the children and teachers from the Boggabri Public School who are seated at the back of the room. To commence today's proceedings, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you the 2002 Elder of the Year in the ACT, as awarded in the ACT NAIDOC Awards, Auntie Laura Bell, who will welcome us to country.
Hello everyone, and ladies and gentlemen, other Indigenous people in the room, welcome. I'm pleased to be here today to provide the Ngunnawal welcome to country, the land of my ancestors and my children. I want to also acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Welcome to my land, Ngunnawal country. I would also like to acknowledge our non-Indigenous friends. I would like to thank the Minister of the Department of Parliamentary Services for again inviting me to perform the Welcome to Country at your gathering today to acknowledge Magna Carta, the Great Charter. The Great Charter is one of the most important documents in history, as it established the principle that everyone is subject to the law and guaranteed the rights of individuals, the rights to justice and the right to a fair trial. It also acknowledged that no one in society is above the law, not the king or his subjects, not the government, not the governed. I hope everyone has an opportunity to learn more about the Charter. The Ngunnawal community are the traditional owners of Canberra and the region. You may not be aware, but Canberra in Ngunnawal language means meeting place. And it has been a meeting place of gathering for many Aboriginal tribes of Australia to come together to deal with important business for the ceremonial occasions. Knowledge to celebrate the gift of heritage and history. The Ngunnawal tribe is made up of several family groups, not just individuals who represent their own interest of country. This is important for you to understand and acknowledge, for all Aboriginal people across Australia, our identity is a collective identity. Before entering another person's country, before your arrival, and not enter a traditional owner that of the country welcomes you. For the reason for this bracket was to respect your spirit while you're in another person's country, and to also show respect for the people of the country you are entering, unless you are invited. The Ngunnawal people, as within all Aboriginal people, have a great heritage and that we would like to share with all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and Australians. We believe that it is important for all to recognise our unique histories and to gain understanding that our land is our heritage and how the loss of land has disconnected many of Aboriginal people from their spiritual links, culture and identity. I would like to thank you again for inviting me to give an Ngunnawal welcome. Please enjoy your conference today. I would just like to finish now in the words of the Ngunnawal people, Ngana, Yarrabah, Yengu, which means you may leave your footprints on the land of Ngunnawal people. Thank you for inviting me for your welcome to country today. Enjoy your conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Laura. Today we mark the 800th anniversary of one of the founding documents of our democracy, Magna Carta. Similar commemorations are being held around the world, but we are informed by the Executive Director of the Magna Carta 800th Committee in the UK that because of the international dateline, our celebrations here in Canberra kick off the worldwide celebrations. Indeed, Madam Speaker's interview with the ABC this morning occurred at precisely 5 minutes past midnight UK time, so we have clearly wasted no time. Parliaments are places of tradition as well as places of progress and change, and Magna Carta is a document that neatly symbolises both tradition and progress. 800 years since it was first granted by King John of England, only to be quickly repudiated, the principles the Magna Carta articulates are seen as hallowed traditions of our legal system, and it is celebrated as cornerstone of constitutional government and parliamentary democracy. Australian Parliament is understandably proud to be the home to the only original Magna Carta in the Southern Hemisphere. It is truly one of the greatest treasures in the Parliament House collections. And it is now my privilege to introduce the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bronwyn Bishop, to talk about the importance of Magna Carta to our Parliament.
Thank you very much, and can I acknowledge all the important dignitaries that you so beautifully outlined in your speech, Madam Acting Secretary. But particularly may I also acknowledge our co-patron, which the President and I have the joy of serving to the Magna Carta Committee, Justice French from the High Court. And of course the Leader of the Opposition and other distinguished guests, including the Attorney General, who are here today. But more importantly, the boys and girls who are with us today, I think are most important because they are the inheritors of this 800-year tradition. 4 kings, perhaps, were the most important in the bringing about of the Magna Carta. Henry I, with his coronation charter, when he promised that he would rule justly and fairly for the people. 1215, the day we celebrate today, was meant to be a peace treaty between the king and the barons. In fact, it brought about civil war. But it was the first to mention free men. It wasn't just about the barons, and of course the freedom of the church. The original articles that were promulgated at that stage, it only lasted 9 weeks before it was repudiated by both the king and the Pope. But of course it didn't go away, it perpetuated, because there had been a tradition in England that there was a concept of justice. These things that were set out in the Magna Carta weren't brand new. It wasn't something that somebody had a light bulb flash and thought we might write this down. It was a concept that had been around, and looking back to the grand golden time of Edward the Confessor. So there was an understanding of what was being said, and of course the Magna Carta was then propagated and sent round the kingdom. Many copies of it were kept. In fact, the surviving 2 that we keep were kept in nunneries, and that's how they did survive, because they were simply not paid much attention to. But the next king of importance was John's son, Henry III, who was only 9 when he inherited the throne. But in 1225, the Magna Carta was reissued in a reduced form, but nonetheless still holding those important issues which only 4 clauses of it still remain as part of the British Constitution today: 1, 13 and 39 and 40. One guaranteeing the freedom of the church, another saying there shall be no arbitrary arrest, another saying that justice is not for sale, and saying there shall be virtually trial by jury because you must be tried by your peers. The rest of it was repealed over time, and although it was a charter and could be withdrawn at any time, it became a statute by 1300. And of course, if we remember our history, we'll remember that 1189 is time immemorial, the time of the accession of Richard I, and it was said then that nothing was much documented before that, and so beyond that date is time immemorial. So the Magna Carta was recorded. The Magna Carta has come down through the ages. There was another, it managed to cross the Atlantic to the United States by way of, again, a charter of the king, when a charter was issued for Virginia, and then the various states that followed, Massachusetts and so on. And it became enshrined very much in the concepts of how the United States evolved. It had an impact through Normandy and France in Europe. So it's not just totally English, it does have continental influence as well. But the most important thing about it is it said that even the mightiest shall be subject to the law. And that is perhaps the greatest principle that we celebrate and commemorate on this 800th anniversary. It was the first attempt to fetter the powers of the king. And that's why, I guess, he repudiated it very, very, very strongly. And of course, when the Stuart kings tried to again establish absolute power, of course, it became very fashionable to talk about Magna Carta again. So it comes in waves, but it is with us and has been through the ages, and of course forms part of the unwritten constitution of the United Kingdom. We share that tradition, that Westminster tradition. There was a time when people talked about us as Washminster because we had some Washington influences, but what we have done is made it very much our own. We are Osminster. And here we revere the inheritance that we have, but we have made things our way. We are truly a strong, independent nation that values its roots, of which the Magna Carta is certainly an important part. And so it's a great deal of pleasure that I ask the Prime Minister if he will now come and speak to you on this very important day on his thoughts about the importance of the Grand Charter.
Madam Speaker, Mr President, Opposition Leader, Parliamentary colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today and on a number of occasions over coming weeks, we will celebrate the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, perhaps the most important constitutional document of all times, that has shaped our history and that of so much of the modern world. Magna Carta was, of course, repudiated by King John a few weeks after he signed it. It was denounced by the then Pope as dangerously subversive, and Oliver Cromwell called it a gust of hot air. Yet it has become the foundation of liberty by establishing that no man is above the law, not even the king. It was subsequently reissued by several monarchs, including Edward I in 1297, who proclaimed that it had become part of the common law of England. It's one of the very few originals of this 1297 proclamation of Magna Carta which rests here in this Parliament as a mark of our fidelity to the great traditions upon which democracy rests. The 1952 acquisition of Australia's copy was shrouded in controversy, as most good things are. A school in England needed money and had put it up for sale. The British Museum had offered a niggardly £2,000, but Australia's Prime Minister, Sir Robert Menzies, knew its value and offered the full £12,500 asking price. Not everyone thought that spending £12,500 on a piece of old parchment was a good investment. In fact, this was to become Bob Menzies' Blue Poles moment. One of the fiercest critics of the Menzies investment was long-serving Labor MP and Whitlam government minister Clyde Cameron, who said that the money would have been much better spent sending a copy of Magna Carta to every school child in this Commonwealth of ours. And today, in launching these commemorative coins and in presenting them to the students of Boggabri Public School, we do give Australia's school children, and indeed our future leaders, a chance to savour this document and this moment in history, which now belongs not just to Britain, but to all who enjoy freedom under the law. Modern Australia has an Indigenous heritage and a multicultural character, but it also has a British foundation that we neglect at our peril, as indeed Clyde Cameron came to appreciate when he subsequently referred to our copy of Magna Carta, whose purchase he'd scorned, as this priceless relic. Now, some of us in this parliament are eager for smaller government, lower taxes and greater freedom. Others yearn for more equality and fairness. Yet all of us, regardless of the particular political tradition which we represent, respect the values and the institutions on which our polity rests and which have so steadfastly stood the test of time. Today, we acknowledge a grand tradition of which we are today's custodians, and we pledge to build on this magnificent legacy.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I would now like to ask the CEO of the Royal Australian Mint, Mr Ross McDermott, to say a few words.
Thank you, Dr Harriet. Prime Minister, Honourable Tony Abbott, the House of Representatives, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bronwyn Bishop, the President of the Senate, Senator Stephen Parry, the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Bill Shorten, Justice French, Attorney General George Brandis, members of Federal Parliament and ACT Legislative Assembly members, ambassadors and High Commissioners, the primary school children of Boggabri, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In a year in which the Royal Australian Mint is celebrating 50 years of providing circulating coins to Australia, we are again privileged to be involved in the recognition and celebration of a major event in Australia's history, the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. And thank you to the Parliament House team for the honour of being involved. It's been a privilege. In the last 50 years, the Royal Australian Mint has commemorated, celebrated and recognised many of Australia's significant historical occasions, inspirational Australians, sporting successes, anniversaries, iconic locations and symbols of who we are and where we've come from. Examples include Slim Dusty and Dame Joan Sutherland, Fred Hollows to Burke and Wills, the 50th anniversary of IATSIS, the bicentenary, Mary MacKillop and Steve Irwin, the World Cup Cricket and Olympic Games, the Great Barrier Reef, Mawson's Hut, the Opera House and many more. In the last 5 years, the Royal Australian Mint has been recognised for its creativity and innovation, winning an Australian Engineering Excellence Award, International Coin Awards for designing and producing the first in the world coloured curved coins, coloured circulating coins, the best example being the recent release of the $2 Lest We Forget red coin, triangular coins, one we released last year, which was the 25th anniversary of Parliament House, and more recently the beautiful coloured triangular coin commemorating the landing in Gallipoli, part of our Anzac program. The Magna Carta is an example of all that I've described. It is reflecting the commemoration of a really important occasion and a period of history that's critical to all of us. Its rectangular shape is innovative and the micro text on the coin is creative. The $5 fine silver antique finished rectangular coin, hard to understand rectangular coins, with a significant Latin inscription in microtext has been a challenge for the Royal Australian Mint team, but one that we have been privileged and honoured to accept. A huge thank you to the Royal Australian Mint team, from Aaron Baggio, the designer, to everyone who has been part of its production and promotion. It is now my honour to present these coins to the Speaker of the House of Representatives and also the President of the Senate, and a couple of gifts to the Leader of the Opposition as well as the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr McDermott, and it is indeed a splendid coin. I would now like to welcome the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Bill Shorten. Thank you.
I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the first lawmakers of our continent, and I pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Prime Minister, distinguished guests, one and all. The authors of the Magna Carta were troublemakers. The Magna Carta we celebrate as the foundation of our decent and civilised society began as treason and subversion. 8 centuries ago, a weak, high-taxing king, a king so unpopular there has never been another to carry his name, and 25 fractious barons, fearing the loss of their status, territory, feudal servants, and even more of their money and taxes to pay for the king's lost wars, converged halfway between the rebels' camp and the royals' camp at Runnymede. The barons brought with them a document, a great charter on fine vellum, calfskin, written in abbreviated Latin with swan and goose feather quills, dipped in ink made from a mixture of crushed wasp eggs, oak tree bark and iron filings. This was no piece of elaborate calligraphy, stylised capital letters or fanciful illumination. It was a practical working document, a list of feudal grievances, 63 clauses long. Some have long since faded into history, but others have echoed down through the ages. Pillars of our justice system, protection from illegal and arbitrary incarceration, the right to a speedy trial before a jury of one's peers. There was freedom of trade and commerce, the lifeblood of great trading nations. Allowing widows to remarry, the first minimal recognition of women's rights. There was even a single standard for weights and measures. And at the very heart of the Magna Carta, etched into each word of those 63 clauses, was one idea. One of the great enduring ideas in the history of our world. The idea that a nation and a people could be governed and unified, not by an army, nor the threat of force, nor the fear of secret informants, not by a dictator or even a benevolent king. but as Melvyn Bragg has put it, a piece of writing. Government and society, liberties and rights, organised around a document and made to hold by a piece of writing. In England, this proposition was tested by civil war and the Glorious Revolution, and it spread across the world. To America, where revolutionaries saw themselves as fighting for the rights enshrined in the Magna Carta. Liberties they later guaranteed in their own Bill of Rights, specifically, indeed, the 5th and 6th famous amendments. To France, through the philosophies of the Enlightenment, the social contract, and the declarations of the rights of man and the citizen. All the way to the United Nations, whose Universal Declaration of Rights Eleanor Roosevelt would call the Magna Carta for all mankind. And of course, here in our home Australia, in the parliamentary democracy we've crafted in our egalitarian image, the Magna Carta lives around us, even now, on either side of this hall, in the chambers of our democracy. Above us, on the roof of the Parliament, where any person can walk because every person is sovereign. Out the doors behind you, in the High Court, that interprets the Constitution, upholds the separation of powers, and treats everyone equally under law. And across the lake, in the memorial to those Australians who've died in wars, fought to defend these very ideals. On its 800th birthday, we salute the Magna Carta as a flickering candle, a compass, a guiding star, the true beginning of rights and liberties. None of them given lightly, every one hard fought for, down the generations and around our world. And we must continue to fight for these freedoms, because they can be lost much more easily than won. By the Magna Carta's light and its words, its defiance and its gift of hope, we see the way. Long may it reign.
Thank you, Mr Shorten. I would now like to welcome the President of the Senate, the Honourable Stephen Parry, to conclude proceedings this morning.
Thank you, Diane. Prime Minister, my co-presiding officer, Madam Speaker, parliamentary colleagues, distinguished guests, one and all. It is my role on behalf of the Speaker to close the formal proceedings today, but I just ask your indulgence just for a moment. I'm going to address particularly the school students here from Boggabri. They've travelled some 700 kilometres to be with us today. It's quite significant that they're the most fortunate school children to be here on this particular occasion. And so I just want to make some remarks and address those children on this very significant occasion. Most of you would probably, like me, I wasn't quite aware where Boggabri was until this morning, but Boggabri, it sits on the Naomi River between Gunnedah and Narrabri on the Kamilaroi Highway, and I'm sure you all knew that. It means place of many creeks, and in the language of the Kamilaroi tribe from that region who have occupied the area for more than 45,000 years. Boggabri School celebrates 142 years this year, so the students from the school will appreciate the importance of marking anniversaries, as we are marking a very significant anniversary here today. Like many towns in Australia, Boggabri has a courthouse. I understand it hasn't been used since 1980, but nevertheless it's a symbol, a strong symbol of the rule of law and of the justice system. The Boggabri School understands the principles in relation to law and order. They too have rules within their own school environment, and I'm sure that they can now relate to the very importance of the Magna Carta some 800 years ago. That really is the foundation of how rules and laws have been developed. So to the students of Boggabri, I say welcome here today. Thank you for being part of this very significant event. And shortly after we close proceedings, the students will be presented with a commemorative coin each. So it's a very special and significant achievement for those students who've come 700 kilometres away to be here with us and to receive those coins. Once the students have had those coins presented, we invite all of you to stay with us and celebrate this occasion by sharing in a morning tea. So thank you very much on behalf of the Speaker and I for being here with us today. Please leave this place in the sure knowledge that despite the fact that in the United States the other original Magna Carta outside of the United Kingdom sold for in excess of $30 million, we won't be selling ours. We'll be retaining it. It's a treasured place in this Parliament and it will stay here, and long may we secure and keep that constant reminder of that 800-year-old document. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us this morning.